Hello students, today in this video we will be discussing about your third unit, that is internal control. Okay, we will be starting off with your third unit, which is known as internal control. So to begin with, now let's look into what internal control is. So internal control, as per accounting and auditing, it refers to the process for assuring achievement of an organization's objective in operations effectiveness and efficiency. Also, it also helps you in achieving the organization's reliability in financial reporting, as well as complying with all the rules and regulations, policies. Okay, basically internal control is a broad concept which involves everything about the organization. It also includes about the controls as to how the organization controls the risk of the organization. Also, it helps the organization to monitor the internal environment. Okay, internal control helps the organization to monitor the internal environment. It also helps the organization's resources, that is, it helps in giving direction, it helps in monitoring and measurement. Also, it plays a very important role in detecting any sorts of frauds or errors and preventing any sorts of fraud or error, and protecting the organization's resources as well as the reputation of the organization. So this is your internal control. Now there are 5 components of internal control. That is, your 5 components are the control environment. Okay, first one is your control environment. Second one is your entity risk assessment process. Third is your information system. Fourth is your control activities, and fifth one is your monitoring of controls. Now let's look into what is your control environment. Okay, now what is control environment? Control environment is nothing but it is a process which includes the governance. Governance means the managing of the internal organization, and it is a management function of the organization. So basically your internal control is the governance and the management function of the organization, which focuses mainly on attitude, awareness and actions which are responsible for designing, implementing and monitoring internal controls. Okay, basically it is responsible for all of these activities. Now the control environment is basically very relevant when the auditor obtains the understanding about the following things. That is, only when the auditor obtains the information about these 3 following things, he will know what it is actually about. So first one is your communication and enforcement of integrity and ethical values. We all know how important it is, that is how important ethical values and moral values are in organization. Commitment to competence, that is how competent a company should be in order to meet up with the cutthroat competition in the organization's environment. And participation by those charged with governance. So these are the 3 things that the organization these are the 3 elements of control environment that are relevant when the auditor obtains understanding, including the following things. Also, it includes the further things, that is management philosophy and operating style. Okay, before you go into internal control, before you go about identifying the environment of the organization, identifying the control environment of the organization, you need to know what is the management's philosophy, what is the kind of leadership style which is prevailing in the organization, what is the operating style of the organization. Second one is what is the organization structure, whether it is a tall organization structure or a flat organization structure. Third is assignment of authority and responsibility, as to how is the authority and responsibility being distributed, who are the people available in the top management, and who are the managers, who are the department managers, etc., who come in the middle level management and who come in the low level management. This also will be disclosed in the particular information. Next is your human resource policies and practices. What are the human resource policies, like your bonus, your layoff, your rewards, incentives, benefits? What are the kind of policies and what are the kind of practices which are taken into consideration by the organization? For example, the basic example you can give for control environment is codes of conduct and organization chart. That is, codes of conduct is what is the ethical values of the particular business and how the business is functioning efficiently and ethically. Next is your risk assessment process. Risk assessment process is basically the risk, it be either a large risk or a small risk. Okay, internal control will help you in assessing risk. It will help you in identifying what is the nature of risk, what is the size of the risk, whether the risk is complex or whether it can be easily sorted out. Okay, what is the possible solution that you need to take out for that particular solving of risk, etc. The internal control process will help you in identifying the risk and mitigating and eliminating that particular risk. Third one is your information system. Internal internal control will help you in reporting necessary information and recording certain information. That is recording about your transactions, what is your day-to-day transaction, what is the kind of process that you're using for transaction, okay, maintaining accountability for assets and liabilities, then resolving any incorrect processing of transaction, okay, process for account overrides in case if there is any mistake in the ledger, in case if there is wrong entry which is being made, okay, all the capital information that has to be entered in the information system. See, earlier information system basically you used to record it, everything was manual, but now you can even record it in and store it in your data and computer basis, right? So information includes the information system, that is internal control will help you in setting up this particular information, okay? This is your day-to-day transaction, whether you've transferred any amount, okay, what is the check that you've received, what is the balance that is available, what is the capital of the company, okay, all of this information will be disclosed in the information system. Your fifth one is your control activities. What is the control activities? With your control activities are basically those activities like who can authorize the reports, okay, who can review the performance, who can access or process the information, physical control, segregation of duties, okay. Internal controls also make sure that they have included these particular policies and procedures of the organization, and also they have included all of these activities regarding your authorization, performance review, information processing, physical controls, and segregation of duties. Lastly, it is monitoring of controls. Now, monitoring of controls is very important because you just can't implement internal control and leave it like that, right? You need to continuously assess and you need to continuously see if the control that you've implemented is effective or not, whether it has been performed properly or not, whether it is implemented and whether it is able to achieve success or not, right? So you should not simply just implement it and leave it, but you should see if any frauds or errors are detected, okay. You need to continuously monitor to see if any changes have to be made, okay. What is the necessary changes that need to be made in the monitoring of internal control, because internal control is the key role of the internal auditor. It is the main role which is played by the internal auditor. So these are the 5 elements or components of your internal control, okay. The 5 elements and components, that is control environment, entity risk assessment process, information system, control activities, and monitoring of controls. These are your elements. Moving on to your next topic, you have auditors record internal control systems. Auditor record internal control system is again just like your previous topic, wherein the auditor can achieve a better insight about, better understanding about what is the management all about, and what is the reason for which the organization is existing, and how you need to go about documenting the entire activities of the organization. First one is auditors record internal control system. In that you have identifying your controls. Identifying your controls is basically wherein the auditor, that is the internal auditor, needs to identify what are the basic objectives and what are the objectives that need to be achieved at the entry level or the entity level. Also, controls must reduce risk to acceptable level, okay. Then you have to establish necessary controls in order to avoid any sort of uncertainties, or in case if there is any problem which is arised, how you need to solve that particular problem. Now, controls can also be identified at every organization level, okay. These are the 5 levels at which you can identify your controls. First one is your control environment, okay. While you are controlling your environment, that is organization's internal environment and your external environment. Organization's internal environment is something that can be controllable. Even if there is a problem or uncertainty, it can be controlled. But external environment, only you can be prepared for it, but you cannot control it to a larger extent. Next is risk assessment, that is assessing your risk in order to see that your organization does not have to face any sort of problems or any sort of losses. Next is your control activities, like your day-to-day operations, or your activities like your examination of documents or surveys or anything. These are your control activities. Information and communication, that is what needs to be what kind of information needs to be collected, and what has to be collected, and to whom the particular information needs to be communicated, whether it is to the top management and who in top management also should be properly noted. Lastly, it is monitoring. Just like how we looked into your next previous point, like it is about monitoring, like how you need to monitor every information and how you need to control the particular risk and how you need to analyze your particular procedures to see if the internal control is effective in order to carry out the day-to-day activities and whether it is helping out the auditor or not. Second point is control objectives. Now, what is this control objective? Control objective is basically wherein you are controlling your documentation, identifying what objectives needs to be stated, okay? Then how you need to comply each and every document, and what are the relevant authorities to whom you need to report your activities to, and whom you need to report your reports to, and whom you need to submit your documents, etc. All this will be mentioned. Then in your control activities, you need to take into consideration these following objectives. That is completeness. Completeness is basically what prevents duplicate postings by the system, right? You need to ensure that whatever entry you're making is original and true, and it is you're making only for one time. You should avoid making of duplicate entries. Second one is you should check the accuracy. That is check whether how true that particular data or information is, how accurate that particular data or information is. Third is validity. Like validity is something that prevents the transaction, right? You need to see till when the authorized transactions is available and till when the particular transaction is valid. Fourth is your restricted access. Restricted access is basically who can access to that particular data. What data confidentiality. Okay, who can access to that particular data, because data will not be given to each and every person, right? Because it is something that needs to be confidential and it will be only given to the authorities who are responsible of maintaining that particular data or people who are available in the higher authority. So all of this will be taken into consideration. Third is you need to document the controls. Like whatever the controls have been made, you need to write it down, you need to record it, okay? So basically you need to document the internal controls effectively so that there is a effective flow of transactions. You are recording all the transactions, you're authorizing the transactions. Also, the auditor must identify what are the documents that he needs to submit along with this particular information, how he needs to support the particular documents, and how he needs to manage risk in case if there is any sort of risk which is arising, okay, and how he needs to achieve a desired level of control. Okay, so this is your documenting controls. Next is your types of documentation. Why is documentation first of all very important? Because documentation is something that is helping you in a manner, it is like a proof, okay? Documentation is basically like a proof. It is like a written report which says that this particular activity was being carried out and these are the terms and conditions at which certain things were agreed upon. So moving on to your next topic, you have types of documentation. What is a documentation? Like internal documentation can be in the form of flow charts, it could be in the form of manuals, okay, narrative description, or any sort of thing. It is something that is written, okay? It is something that is written. First point is your documentation can be in the form of flow chart. Like flow chart is basically it is like a flow chart is basically, you know, it is like a representation wherein you're showing the flow throughout flow of the activities, like what are the activities that are conducted, okay, how it is gone in a stepwise manner, then who are the people responsible for those particular activities, okay, what are the necessary problems that have arisen in that particular activities, or what was the cost which was involved in the activities. All of that will be showed in the flow chart. Next is your narrative description. Similar to your flow chart, either if you want to give a description, you can also give a narrative description wherein you can explain everything in detail in the written form from the time that particular event has started or anything. Instead of it is just a supplement to your flowchart. Instead of showing everything in a flowchart manner, you're just explaining it in a lengthy paragraph in your own words using a proper sentence formation. Then next one is you have your internal control questionnaire. Internal control questionnaire is wherein you're structuring a particular questionnaire wherein you are identifying gaps, you're identifying strengths, weaknesses. Suppose for example you attend a particular seminar, okay? Don't you get a feedback form? You do get a feedback form, right? Wherein they ask you whether the seminar was helpful for you, okay? Would you like to attend more seminars in future? Just like that, you have your internal control questionnaires also in order to just make the particular process in a very better way. Okay, next is your risk and control matrices. Risk and control matrices are basically, it is a document which controls your risk and which has effective control on the risk, and also it helps you in identifying the basic gaps in between your actual controls and specific control objectives and risk. Okay, fifth one is your policy and procedure manuals. Like, what are the policies, what are the guidelines that need to be followed, okay, what are the activity, how it has to be given in writing. Then how you have to go about working towards the achievement of organization goals, and how you need to achieve your performance improvement objectives. Sixth one is sound documentation. How nicely you need to prepare the particular document, and how you need to put it across in terms of flow chart or narrative description or internal control questionnaire or anything, whichever is effective by the organization. They need to follow a particular method of documentation, and they need to document each and every detail in that particular thing. Okay, so this was your previous topic, that is documentation, that which spoke about the types of documentation. Now moving on to your next topic, you have evaluation of internal control components. How are you going to evaluate what are your components of internal control? Now that we know internal control is something that is related to the internal part of the organization, something that is controllable. Okay, so internal control components include your control environment. What is your control environment? Now, what is your control environment? Control environment is what are the kind of policies which are available in the organization, what are the types of behaviors that are available in the organization, okay, what is the kind of organization structure, what is the kind of leadership that is followed in the organization, etc. Okay, to name a few, you have your integrity and ethical values. Okay, what comes under control environment is your integrity and ethical values. The integrity and ethical values that are followed by the top management in terms of your financial reporting. Next is importance of board of directors. How important the board of directors are, and what is their responsibility in terms of financial reporting. Third one is management philosophy and operating style. What is the philosophy that the management is operating, or what is the style of management, and how is this particular operating style affecting the internal control of the financial reporting. Then commitment to financial reporting competencies. Commitment to financial reporting competency is how a particular individual is competent, and how they are using their roles and responsibilities, and how punctual they are in carrying out their duties and responsibilities, and how well they are reporting to the particular company, and how they are maintaining the financial records. Lastly, it is your human resource, like how much human resource is available, how are you going to make the payment of bonus, okay, how are you going to compensate the employees, what is the salary that you're paying, etc. will be taken into consideration. Now, an evaluation of the extent of which an entity's control environment enhances the financial reporting objectives would focus on these following points. Okay, these are the following points that you need to keep in mind when you're talking about your company's internal control. First one is your management interaction with your internal and your external auditor, and also the financial reporting, how you're going to how they are going to behave in terms of your financial reporting matters, and whether this particular might have a particular adverse impact on the financial reporting or not. Next is the pressure to meet unrealistic performance targets. Okay, what is the kind of pressure that you are going to meet your unrealistic targets? Because see, goals and objectives should be realistic. Only then you will be able to work towards it and achieve your goals and objective. Because only if the goals and objectives are realistic, then you will be able to achieve it. But in case if they are not realistic, then you will not be able to achieve it. Okay, then what is the management attitude towards your passing established control procedure? This also will be taken into consideration. Then what is the informal and formal job description? Okay, then what is the independence of board member, composition of board members, like how many board of directors are there, how many number of employees are there, how many auditors are there, okay, what is the how you are going to carry out your investigation, how many members are there in the investigation team, etc. will be taken into consideration. Then you have your management attitude towards your financial reporting. Also, this will be taken into consideration. Next, you have your risk assessment. That is basically assessing your risk from your internal and your external sources. Only when you assess your risk, you will be able to manage risk. Okay, only if you know that there is a risk that is arise, or there is something that is a problem, only then you will be able to identify the risk. Only then you will be able to come out with necessary solutions in order to mitigate that particular risk. Now, there are three main principles in terms of risk assessment. First one is your importance of financial reporting objectives. objective. First is you need to know, before you assess your risk, you need to know the precondition is you need to establish of objectives of reliable financial reporting. You need to see whether the particular financial reporting is reliable or not, whether it is because whether you're able to assess the particular risk or not. Second precondition is identification and analysis of financial reporting risk. Okay, first you need to identify what your risk is, then analyze the particular risk, whether it is in terms of financial reporting, and on what basis, what kind of solution that needs to be taken out in order to manage this particular risk. Then you have your assessment of fraud risk, whether the fraud is being done intentionally or intentionally, okay, on how many transactions, from when has the fraud been occurring, then what is the basic what can be the basic punishment that can be given for the person who's carried out the fraud, and how you can actually mitigate the fraud and control your activities of the business. Also, the following assessment of fraud risk consists of the following things. That is how you need to communicate the objectives to the employees, then extent to which the organization has to maintain its statements, okay, then how you need to maintain thoroughness and relevance in your analysis procedure, okay, existence of mechanism, etc. All of this also has to be taken into consideration. Next is your control activities. Control activities is basically how effectively you're going to carry out your activities of control, whether it is internal control or your external control. Now, there are various main principles in effective control activities. First one is elements of a control activity. That is basically how you're going to communicate these particular control activity to various levels, and how you're going to manage your directives and carried out. Second one is control activities linked to risk assessment. How you're going to link your activities, how you're going to link your actions, and how you're going to address your risk in the achievement of financial reporting objective. Third is your selection and development of control objective. How effectively you're going to select a particular activity, and how you're going to implement it, and how you're going to manage your risk of the organization, and how you're going to report this particular risk. Lastly, it is your information technology. What kind of technology do you require? Okay, whether you want to carry out the financial reporting online, then how are you going to verify the clarity of accounts? How you're going to check for your each and every transaction? How you're going to check for your ledger balances, your balance sheet, your profit and loss, etc. Next it is information and communication. Information and communication is what kind of information you need to collect, whether it is financial information or non-financial information, and you need to make sure that you're collecting only relevant information, whatever information is required. Okay, now under this also you have your main principle, that is information needs, where you need to see whether the particular company requires information or not, and how you need to achieve this particular information. Then information control, as to who is controlling the information, and what kind of information is captured, and how it is helping you achieve the financial reporting objectives. Third is management communication, how you're going to communicate all of these information and all of these information to your management, okay, how you're going to communicate it to them as well as to the employees who are involved in carrying out these activities. Fourth is communication with outside parties. That is whether it is external auditor or anyone, how are you going to communicate it with the external parties. Now, the evaluation basically includes the following things. That is, the evaluation of information and communication process of financial reporting includes the following things. That is how you need to obtain external and internal information. Okay, then using both financial information and management decision, like how you're going to use financial information to come up with your management decision as a basis of management decision. Then how you're going to standardize, how you're going to downstream your communication of standards and ethical conduct. Then establishment of channels and communication. Okay, then who will be the person who will carry out the activity, and who will communicate all the information. Also, how you're going to follow it up on timely basis, and how you're going to communicate it to your internal and external parties. So your last point is monitoring. How effectively you're going to monitor, whether to see whether that particular information has been helpful, and whether it has been able to solve the particular risk, and whether it is able to come up with effective solutions for the same. Moving on to your next topic, you have principles of internal control monitoring, which we'll be discussing in your next video.